Hello everyone, Will here from GoToMarketGuru.com. Welcome to the second module of the Breaking into Software Sales course. In this particular module, we're going to talk about how to structure your search. And in this lecture in particular, we're going to reflect a little bit internally and figure out what exactly do we want in life, what kind of questions should we ask ourselves, what is the marketing looking for, and then how do we create fit and alignment between those two things. I hope you enjoy. Framing your journey. Before you embark on any adventure or path, it's really important to have perspective. Before someone can tell you how to do something, you need to ask yourself, why do I even want to do it? So we're going to look at three types of perspective. One is called the internal view, the second is the external view, and the third is the holistic view in the slides that follow. The internal view is going to be about how we perceive ourselves. So what does the good life look like in our eyes, and how do we approach that type of thinking? The second is the external view. What are the qualities that other people perceive us on a more objective level? We're going to talk about professional experience and so forth. And then we're going to put everything together, and based on our internal view and the external view, we're going to find our fit on what type of environment we should place ourselves in. Let's dive in. Beginning from the internal view, the internal perspective, there are three core things that make this up: our values, our passions, and our skills. Starting with our values, we want to ask ourselves, what do we hold dear? What is our version of the good life? What behaviors do we demand from ourselves and admire in others? If we find that we're in an environment where we don't value the work it's doing or the people it's with, we're going to be very unhappy. Second of all is our passions. You want to ask yourself questions like, what energizes you? How do you like to spend your free time? And what environments or activities drain you? Just like values, if you find yourself in a company or a sector or on a team with people who don't share your passions, you're not going to last there very long. And lastly, your skills. What are your strengths? Do an accurate and honest assessment of this, just as you should with your weaknesses. Are you strong in the verbal sphere? Are you mathematically oriented? Are you an athletic individual, artistic? Are you good with people? What are you actively doing to grow if you've identified that you're weak in any one of those areas? So to summarize, your values, your passions, and your skills are going to shape your internal perspective on what you want out of life, and that's a very important piece of the puzzle. Now we're going to look at, kind of on a similar line, what's sought after. So these are a general mosaic of successful traits. And included within these, we have things like accountability, persistence, active listening, ambition, curiosity, confidence, empathy, initiative, integrity, charm, independence, honesty. These are things that sales recruiters are going to look for in highly sought after sales candidates. And it's important to ask yourself, do I embody these? Now, you might be thinking to yourself, this is somewhat of a general list, and this is relevant to every position, and you know what, you're half right. And that's why I've included some more too. People. If you're going to be a sales professional, you better be good with people. And I say that in a pretty authoritative way, but it's a people position. I never saw myself as a people person. I always saw myself as kind of that introvert academic reader. But you know what? I learned pretty quick that if you want to be successful in this gig, you got to be good with people. The second is competition. Sales is a very competitive field, and that's what keeps a lot of people out of it. They pay a lot of money for a reason. It's hard stuff, and you always got to be hustling and bustling and going after it. And a lot of people with athletic backgrounds actually like sales because they're used to being tracked. And when you're working in sales, you are going to be tracked. Your numbers, your KPIs, monthly, quarterly, annually. If that doesn't sound exciting, don't worry. At first, maybe not. But just if that sounds exciting right off the bat, then this is a perfect fit for you. But sales is competitive. And lastly, money. This is something that, I think a lot of courses don't like to talk about because it doesn't sound quote unquote professional. But money is very important to sales. And salespeople love money. And that's, what it's all about. If you don't produce money, you can have all of these traits. You will lose your job. And I say that, just because it needs to be said. But people, competition, and money, I think at its heart, that's what sales is about. Then on top of that, we have integrity, charm, ambition, active listening, persistent. And of course, because I want to and have to, ethics is extremely important. Being an ethical person in sales rep, if you took the free lecture, setting the bar, you set the bar, that's table stakes, but this is what comes after. So we're going to move on now What you can offer. So we've done little bit of internal reflection. We've looked at what the market demands from you as far as traits. Now we're going to look at what you can offer on a more professional line of things. And we're going to use the word accounting because it's pretty nuts and bolts here. Experience. What are your major accomplishments? These are the types of things that you'll see on your resume and you want to talk about. What does hard work mean to you? What does smart work mean to you? How do you orient your work-life behavior? Education, quite literally. What did you study and why? If you never went to university, that's fine, but what are your curiosities? What drives your intellect? And lastly, do you have a formal or informal learning style? At the beginning, when you join a company, they might give you some documentation, and that's where your formal learning style comes into play. But once you're on the job, you're going to be doing a lot of informal learning. How best can you organize information? And both are incredibly important, but I'd say informal learning is even more important. And lastly, mentality. We're going to talk about how you orient your mind and how do you orient yourself towards your goals. And we'll start with, how would you define the notion of excellence? It sounds a little grandiose, but essentially, it's super important because if you're an account executive and you're gunning to be the number one rep and consistently hit your quota and you're bringing in, 100K, 150K, 200K a year, if you're just knocking things out of the park in a top company, you have to be pretty excellent. You have to be nailing every step of the process. So, what are examples in your mind of how you've excelled in the past, and, do you have to adapt it, or what exactly is that? What makes you tick? What gets you out of bed? What fires you up? That's super important, and making sure you're aligned towards a job in sales and getting in. Are you team-oriented or individual-oriented? Both people can excel in their own way, but where do you fit on that spectrum? And are you introverted or extroverted? Do you like being kind of lone wolf on yourself? Or do you get energy from working with other people? So these are important questions, along with experience, education, mentality is really important as far as what you can offer the company and how you communicate that. Now we're going to dive into what is sought after. So this is kind of like we spent the first half talking about you. Now we're going to talk about what they want, and they meaning people hiring sales professionals. So about 2/3 of sales professionals have a bachelor's degree. It's not required. I've met a lot of people, generally from older generations, who didn't have any education, but a bachelor's degree is generally required these days. Then there's a percentage of people who have associate's degrees. So as I mentioned, it's not required. There are a percentage of people who have just a high school degree. Master's degrees, not very. Not many people have it, but if you do, it's not gonna detract from your application by any standard. Some people in sales management positions might have an MBA, but generally speaking, bachelor's is all you need. Simple, point short. Field of study. Lots of different degrees are in sales, and I think diversity in this respect is great. Having a diverse set of perspectives is super important in sales. So, people come from business administration degrees, STEM degrees, so science, technology, engineering, mathematics. The social sciences, that's my background, economics, politics, philosophy, or the humanities. Maybe someone studied literature. Super relevant, but kind of in this order is what you see. And then the general profile of a sales rep. Again, this is not what you need to have. If you have some of these qualities, fantastic. If not, equally fantastic. But this is the general profile. Strong academics, I'd say at least a B student. Athletic background helps, just for the point I mentioned of keeping, KPIs being measured and so forth. An entrepreneurial spirit. If you're a salesperson, you are an entrepreneur on training wheels, quite literally. You're running and gunning for the company, promoting their good or service. You're kind of like a mini CEO is what you are. You want high energy, at least when you're on the field, because you want to energize other people. Being extroverted helps. You want to be talking, you want to be getting to know people. You want to be a great listener, and I'll talk about this later on in the course, especially in the Sales Bootcamp. And you want to be confident. You have to be confident. I'm not talking about the type of brash confidence that no one admires, but you have to be someone who believes in what they say and who's willing to stand up for what they say. It goes a long way in sales. So now we'll move on now to the next stage in this lecture, which involves ranking preferences.